role, really, as you point out, not a job. It's unpaid. And the vision of something as you get 1 year to kind of run the marketing for the City of London. And to do that, I wanted to help us define better what we do and explain better to our stakeholders why we were important. So the definition of what we do, I've very much focused on the fact that we are the world's oldest continuous democratic workers and residents cooperative, which is a very specific definition of who we are. We are nearly 14 centuries old. We've been holding continuous elections since the middle of the 7th century, about 650 AD. And when you look at the things that way, it changes, I think, people's perceptions. Prior to that, we used to use phrases like the governing body of the square mile, but our remit is well beyond the square mile. The distinguishing factor about the definition, though, which is often missed in a modern context, is that workers have the vote. Now, this was traditional across Europe in the Middle Ages, all really up to the age of Napoleon. The Italian city-states, the Hanseatic League, the Dutch cities, the German principalities were all really run in that fashion. And because we give the workers the vote, it becomes an emphasis on business. So our voting structure consists of three legs, really, about 8,000 residents, about 50,000 liverymen, so the traditional guilds have the vote for sheriffs and Lord Mayor, and 615,000 workers. So the great preponderance here is very much on the business, and that dictates what we do. As far as a long-term vision for the city, it's very much that we are a problem-solving center for the world, so very much in line with the title of your vlog, Founders Espresso. I like to call us the world's coffee house. Very much a place where people come to look at solutions to shared global problems, and they can be climate change, mental health, space junk. And to do that, if you've ever been in professional sales or services, one of the things that they teach people in those types of industries is if you can get the client to describe their problem, then you've probably got the sale, assuming you can deliver the solution. And my argument is that our client in London is modestly the world, and that we are trying really to show the world that we can solve their problems. And in the course of that, we're very lucky because our client, the world, sat down 10 years ago and wrote out 17 sustainable development goals. And those are the 17 problems that the world would like solved. So this year we've been hosting 100 plus knowledge mile lectures online, exploring the SDGs. We've had 17 events at Mansion House just on each one of the sustainable development goals. And we started 6 big initiatives here in London on space, on mental health, on constructing science, on AI. We're always very, very interested in sustainable finance and also on smart economy networks.
Absolutely. So very interesting. Thank you, Michael. Can I ask you what inspired you to co-found ZYN, and what were your initial goals in using finance and technology to drive societal progress?
Well, Xian was founded because a group of us had been working together in a firm which was then acquired. And we started, quite interestingly, we started 30 years ago this week. So,
Really?
or sorry,
That's
30
amazing.
years ago last week. It was October,
Last week. Amazing.
October, yeah. So we've been around for a while. I think the biggest thing that, inspired us was we were coming out of an accountancy, management, consultancy, professional services background with a lot of science and engineering, and we believed very strongly in the importance of systems thinking, trying to take a holistic approach, and we wanted to do good. So we looked at very much kind of the world's wicked problems, as they're often termed. That's a phrase popularized, I think, in the early 60s, by Horst Rittel and others. It gained prominence in 2 areas: urban planning and aerospace. And the concept behind wicked problems is that they're wicked. They're difficult to solve. They're nasty, circular, aggressive. They very much like the Irishism. I wouldn't start there from here. So take climate change. Where do you start?
Sorry.
What are you going to do about global health? So we liked examining problems like that and coming up with answers. So Xian's whole thing was focused on trying to help people make better decisions. And if we had a kind of a guiding assumption, it was that if everybody made slightly better decisions every day, the world would be a better place. And we were helping on that. So we wrote a book uh, about 14 years ago now called The Price of Fish. And in that, we talk about how the world could be a better place if decisions were made with regard to four subject areas: choice, economics, evolution, and systems theory.
Amazing. Very interesting. Thank you, Michael. Can I ask you, how did you build a strong working relationship with your key partners, and what made them ideal collaborators for your initiatives?
Hmm. Well, each of the six initiatives requires a different skill set. Each of those initiatives requires different networks, et cetera. So I tend to look at four areas: strategy, people, resources, and organization as the kind of the four areas that we need to think about. So I needed people who understood the problem domain, wanted to solve it, and were open to a slightly more intellectual discussion about how to solve the problem. And I say that because if you're looking at wicked problems, take space junk, there's no particular magic nugget, but you need people to grasp the problem in the first place and not try and create just a single solution. On the other hand, you do need a solution. So you're in this sort of paradoxical situation
Mhm.
of what do you do. So in space, the problem caught my eye because I was looking at those sustainable development goals earlier,
Mhm.
and 40% of them cannot be met without space. The 17 sustainable development goals have beneath them 169 sub goals. So,
Interesting.
and 38.5% or something can't, call it 40 in round numbers, can't be met without space. So, if you're sitting there talking about climate change, you're talking about human trafficking, you're talking about deforestation, you need Earth observation, GPS, telemetry, communications.
Mhm.
So you look at the problem and you go, wow, so why am I solving climate change if I
Right.
can't solve it if this is a problem?
Absolutely.
Now that's a bit extreme because you can pursue things in parallel, but you could see this as an area,
Absolutely.
and then it grows bigger because obviously trade matters, and shipping and aviation needs space, and then defense needs space, so people get
Absolutely.
nervous. And so you looked at that, and then finally we're moving a space industry from the government sector into the private sector. And the government sector may tolerate a spacecraft being knocked out by some junk, but a private sector person is saying, "Wait, I'm investing billions of dollars in space, and this might all get shredded. I'm not so sure I want to invest." So we saw the
Mhm.
scale of the problem. We then began to chat it around. We then began to look at the fact that everybody in the space sector, or almost everybody, had focused very much on technical solutions. So if you say, and people in the space sector would object to this to some degree, but that there's about a 2.5% failure rate, it's not as simple as that. But and they're all talking about getting it down to 1%, and you go, well, that's great, and please keep doing that. But 1% still means the junk problem keeps increasing every year. What are you going to do to
Absolutely.
stop it increasing? And it was very clear that they had involved nothing to do with economics and finance. And so our very simple proposal was both multidisciplinary in the sense of taking the disciplines of finance and economics and adding it to the technical mix, but also,
Absolutely.
multi-sectoral in that we observed that in the shipping and the mining sectors, they have similar problems and they use surety bonds. A surety bond is a bond that you will return it into the state you got it. You will get the oil rig down after 50 years, or
I
you will
see.
clean up the mine. So why don't you have to have a surety bond if you use space?
For the
So as
space, yeah.
simple as that. It comes back to your point about, how did you find your collaborators? You needed people with open, multidisciplinary minds. As far as a strong working relationship, I may or may not be a particularly good leader. I may or may not be a particularly good manager. But if
Mhm.
I've learned one thing in life, you've got the right sort of person, don't manage them, let them do their own thing. So all six of
Absolutely.
these initiatives have been run by somebody who's enthusiastic about it. And I, having described the problem and the solution, let them get on with delivering it.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, Michael. Um, Could you outline your approach to community feedback and share how it has influenced policy or projected development?
Well, if you believe in systems theory, then you believe very strongly in feedback. You know, systems theory arguably says there are seven components of a system: the inputs, the process, the outputs, feedback, which is reporting back,
Mhm.
feed forward, which is telling people what you expect is going to happen, so that there's a reinforcing
Interesting.
circle there. And then you've got very much the kind of the monitoring, what are the key performance metrics, and then you have the overall governance. So that's a fairly straightforward system to somebody like me. Uh, Feed forward and feedback are crucial, though. So feed forward, if you, for your audience, probably think about it as I've done a plan. Okay, so what is the plan? And you tell them this is what I anticipate will happen. And feedback is reporting against it. But feedback is subtle. Um, Firstly, nobody's ever come up with a set of measures, in my opinion, that
Mhm.
they haven't had to adjust or tweak or redefine as they're doing it.
Sure.
That's probably the first thing. The second thing is you've got to be very, very careful. There's a thing known as Goodhart's law that any measure which becomes a target ceases to be a good measure, meaning that when you make something a target as opposed to just sort of saying this is what's happening, uh, human nature comes into play and people start to game the system. Charles
Absolutely.
Goodhart was still alive. He was an economist at the Bank of England, and he noticed when they had a monetary target and they were just looking at it, that was fine. The minute it became a measure, suddenly the target would improve magically.
Interesting.
Um, but then when you dug into it, you realize it might not have improved. It was just that the people recording it had found ways to tweak it so it looked up.
Absolutely.
So you've got to be careful with feedback. But the great thing about feedback in another sense is it also reinforces the plan
True.
because people go, oh, they're actually tracking this every month. So in this role, for the first time, we don't do it monthly; we do it every other month. But I have produced a one page, report card on me, which I don't have to do, but I did it
Mm.
because I believe very strongly in feedback. And people have been looking at that report card and going, oh gosh, that's what he wants to achieve. How can we help him? So it's a nice reinforcing loop there.
Absolutely. So very, very interesting. Also, it's where maybe lies the innovation in this continual loop of conversation, basically.
Mm.
Very interesting. Michael, what strategies have proven most effective for your work with the City of London Corporation, and what unique factors have contributed to their success?
Well, the unique factor is actually probably just luck. You can get lucky, and we've had a lucky run this year, that's for sure. But what strategies have been most effective? Well, I think the biggest thing is I have a very lengthy seven-part strategy to all corporation problems, and I'll go through the seven in a second, but it's the
Mhm.
second one of the parts that's the most important. All the City of London Corporation can do is convene people. That's about all we can do. We've got a little bit of budget. We've got lots of iconic buildings. There's a lot of stuff we have. I'm not saying that's the only thing, but it's really the only unique thing. We're different than a business. It's easier for us to convene people because people assume we're acting in the long-term interests of the city and the workers' cooperative I mentioned earlier. So they assume that we come with goodwill. We're not there to make money out of the situation, which is true.
Mhm.
So the way I look at it is you identify the problem. What are we going to convene around?
Yes.
And so this year we've been convening around, as I said earlier, those six areas of space, mental health, smart community.
Mhm.
There are a couple of other things we've also convened around hydrogen markets, for example, issues to do with financial literacy, international standards. But at the high level, it's been those six. So I've said these six areas this year are what we're going to convene around. Then we convene. And then
Mhm.
I think it's important to bring people in. So I like to call it about getting them to contribute something. Andre, what do you think about space debris? I don't even
Interesting.
know anything about it. Or yes, I think it's not a problem because it's in outer space. Or aren't there?
Mm.
Bring them in, ask them for their opinion. So contribute, develop a consensus around it. What can you articulate what the majority of people feel, and be
Mhm.
quite accurate about that, more accurate about that, what the majority of people who can do something feel. Right?
Absolutely.
Get their commitment, you know, then make sure you communicate that commitment, right?
Mhm.
And then you want to make sure uh, that they're celebrating it, and celebration is
Absolutely.
very important as well. So, identify, convene, contribution, consensus, commitment, communicate, and celebrate are the seven parts to
Really
me. And
interesting.
we follow that through. We are, I'm in celebration mode sort of towards the tail end of the year. I have 1 week in office left. And so a lot of recently has been celebrating, congratulating people, telling them what a good job they've really done,
Absolutely.
giving out awards, freedoms, etc. The beginning of the year, I'd already identified things, but we had started a series of convening sessions,
Mhm.
our 25 coffee colloquies, our events, and all that. And we just sort of marched them through the year in those 6 areas, following that 7 stage plan.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I like a lot this kind of closing the loops. This 7 point strategy. Michael, could you what tools or platform have become essential in supporting your work, and why do they stand out?
Hmm. Well, I guess, tools or platforms, we're seeing, we went through a plethora of communication and organizational tools with the explosion of the internet in the
Mhm.
late 90s and early 2000s. And we're seeing a lot of shakeout in that space. And many of the tools are actually, strictly speaking, not particularly good.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
well, to take LinkedIn, I mean, I'm not saying people don't use it, but it's a very difficult tool to use. It's a very confusing tool. It
True.
doesn't seem to have improved very much, but it has become kind of a default resource. Um,
Absolutely.
Teams is not a particularly good tool, but again, people use Teams or Zoom, so it's not always
Agree.
the technology that works. The next thing you've got to work out is what are these platforms other than technical? And most of them are a platform that has attracted a critical mass of users and has network effects. That doesn't actually make it particularly the best tool for the job.
Absolutely.
So in our case, the fundamental tools have been physical meetings, virtual meetings, and email.
Absolutely.
That's really
It's
it.
basic. Yes. That's it.
We've been using LinkedIn to try and communicate, which is very, very difficult. And then this is off the record if you don't mind, but Twitter is
Absolutely.
really gone down the tubes. Um, so I find it difficult with Twitter having gone down to figure out what to do there. So we're quite hampered in some ways with the tools.
That's
But
it.
ultimately, it goes back to good old meeting with people, and that's it. And so we convene people in a variety of different ways. Online, it's largely been done through webinars, and there we use something called GoToWebinar or whatever. But
Mhm.
it's been the webinar bit. We broadcast on LinkedIn for what it's worth, and as I said, email. When it comes to physical, we've really tried to adopt uh, a few different formats. Face-to-face meetings and workshops and all of that. But our coffee colloquies are interesting. A number of people say that they're akin to pechacuchas or something, but it is something we came up with years ago. And a coffee colloquy is designed to create a high degree of networking. It's also in line with my coffee theme, the world's coffee
Mhm.
house. But people get 4 minutes each. And so it's
Okay.
a 2 hour session with 10 people, ideally on stools, so they feel uncomfortable and can't just slouch back and start
Mhm.
talking. A moderator who is vicious, who's like, I said
Well,
4 minutes,
it's done.
and I meant it, and not just another thing. Like we had an interesting bit where we had a young 17-year-old girl
Mhm.
speaking on education. Next up was a university vice chancellor, and the
I
vice
see.
chancellor wittered for 4 minutes, and the 17-year-old girl kept to 3 minutes and 59 seconds. And the vice chancellor was cut off. And he went, well, oh, actually, I guess I probably ought to make some of my points. And we said, no, you've lost your time slot. And,
No.
you moved on. So that gets you, if you think about it, people arrive. The moderator introduces in 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Then there's
It's very
10
fast.
4-minute sessions. Add back the 3 minutes of handover time, but you got to be fair to people. That gets you to
Hmm.
45 minutes. Then you have
Very great.
45 minutes of Q&A with the audience. Not always, but ideally done with Slido, which I guess is another platform, because that allows the whole audience to participate without derailing. It
Hmm.
stops an audience member standing up and asking the 4-minute question that's not a question,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Uh, so it keeps things moving. And then there's 30 minutes of networking. So I see
Interesting.
Andrea there, talking about his founder's espresso. Within 2 or 3 minutes, I've worked out if I like the guy or hate him. If
Absolutely.
I want to know more about Founders Espresso, that's what I want to know. But maybe the other 140 people don't. And then
Absolutely.
I go up to them in the 30 minutes after and say, I was interested. I needed to know more. Here's my card, and we start chatting. So they've been
So
hyper effective,
very
um,
interesting.
and really allows
Very
people to get
interesting.
the tone of the room. And we've held them on some, as I say, all 17 sustainable development goals, but on topics like seagrass, disagreeing agreeably, all sorts of
Interesting.
subjects.
Interesting. Very interesting. Michael, could you share a significant challenge you face in your career and describe your feelings during that time and how you navigated these difficulties?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in my career has been waking up and feeling that what I'm doing isn't adding any value. Right?
I see. I
I
see.
mean, uh, uh, people will talk about projects that had problems. I love projects when they have problems. It's just what I love doing is solving problems. So that's it. But it's when you feel your career isn't adding anything. And I guess the biggest thing is to realize it's you that's the problem, and that's hard. Uh, you've got to have self-doubt. This is not the uplifting founder's espresso, a shot of caffeine and all that. I don't believe life is all about shots of caffeine or drinks, much as I love them. Um, at the end of the day, it's doubt that leads you to change and do things differently, whether that's to change your faith or whether that's to become creative. I doubt that's the best I can do. I think I could probably do better if I had another go. And doubt is actually the heart of the scientific method. So whenever I face a challenge about being bored, I just ponder, what am I doing wrong? Could I do better here? Is this actually the right job? And I'm just using the tools improperly. Have I not built up the network or whatever? So that's
Interesting.
kind of how I approach things.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much, Michael. What daily practices or routine contribute to your productivity and motivation in such a demanding role?
Well, you should have asked me that question a year ago. To be truthful, I have a great team here. Mansion House is a wonderful team, and I get up every day and I have a very detailed,
Mm-hmm. Ah,
sheet
schedule.
with all of
It's
my
a lot.
meetings.
It's a lot of it.
Uh, so it very much at the end of the day, it's about organization. I don't really know that I know that these sites where you can have 7 practical tools of successful leaders or 10 habits of people who you think you want to admire or whatever. I'm not so sure that I've got that much to contribute, and what I think of as success, somebody else might not. I will say though, never overlook the modest little list. And my thing every day, long before I even took this job on, is very low tech. But well, it's not maybe that low tech. This is the tablet. Have you seen this tablet?
It's
It's
so thin.
amazing. This is a great tablet. Firstly, it's highly
Amazing.
flexible, not like those stupid iPads that break when you do this. It's ultra thin.
Uh,
If you want distributed processing, you can throw these around the room,
Easy.
right? Mine comes with instant encryption, right?
Amazing.
And if you want the leading edge of technology, now I'm on the bleeding edge of technology because these things give really nasty paper cuts.
They are
Um,
dangerous.
yeah, but I carry an index card around with me since I was a kid, I don't like the books that people take because they write in the book and they shut it and they put it on the shelf and they pick it up the next day. They never go through it. So I've got a business card, sorry, not a business card. I've got an index card every day,
Amazing,
you know,
amazing, very
and
interesting.
I think that is the best organizational tool. And when I'm advising people who are doing particularly MSc dissertations or doctorates, I tell them that that's the one thing you need to do. And if you take my doctoral students, I always say, I want you to write down on the very top of the card the current title of your thesis every single day. And
Interesting.
they don't do that. Yeah, it takes a while. And then they begin to realize that the title will change. Yeah,
Absolutely.
a lot of PhD students, they don't want to give it. I don't want to give the title right now. I kind of want to, I just sort of want to study, microbiology and its aspects.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the title of your thesis? Well, I can't say. Well, then I'm not going to advise you, write the
Absolutely.
title down.
Absolutely.
Yes, but what if it's wrong? Write the title down. It will
Absolutely.
change. But every day you get
Absolutely.
up, you got the index card, and then something pops into your head and you write it down again. If you can't get to a computer, that's fine. You can let them pile up and do them on the weekend. But you
Very
also know that
interesting.
you need to do something with the card, which is where those little moleskin books don't do the trick for me. Um, so that's a simple, very effective technique. Keep doing a list.
Very interesting. I will for sure use it in the near future, this
Mm.
technique. Thank you, Michael. Um, what personal qualities have been most valuable in your leadership journey, and how did you cultivate or strengthen these traits?
Hmm. I think it's probably related oddly to the question you didn't ask, the one just before it, which is
Mhm.
uncertainty.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, I think it's your tolerance for uncertainty dictates the kind of person you're going to be and what you're going to do in your career. I think one of the best compliments I ever had from a client we were in a medical research environment that was very demanding, but also very interestingly rapidly changing. And every day I came in, things would take wildly different courses. And my client turned to me one day and said, "Yeah, what's really amazing is, you exhibit the highest degree of tolerance for uncertainty I've ever seen." Um,
Interesting.
so that's me though. I mean, some people are not tolerant of uncertainty, and they have different roles to play. So I think it's largely your tolerance for uncertainty that dictates your personal qualities.
Very,
When I
very
look at
interesting.
uncertainty, I tend to see really only four strategies. So if you think about life as a distribution curve of potential
Hmm.
outcomes, your first choice is, am I going to be in this game at all? So imagine that you're running a shoe firm
Hmm.
and you've got we could lose 5 million this year. We could make 10 million. There's a distribution curve. I'm going to work really, really hard at it. Looked at theoretically, I would contend there are only four things you can do. You can say, you know what? I don't want to lose 5 million. I don't want to even take a chance on it. I'm going to get out of shoes.
Hmm.
In other words, you don't
Correct.
have to play the game.
Absolutely.
Remember that. And so few people remember that there's a time you just stop. If you find yourself, playing football against Ronaldo or something, and all you want to do is win, well, maybe you should just quit.
Yeah, that's it.
And there's nothing wrong with quitting. That's another problem we've got in the modern era. Only
Absolutely.
losers quit. Only losers quit. And quitters win. And you're kind of like, well, anyway. So that's kind of one thing. Second thing is, okay, I'm going to play the game. Well, that leaves only three. And
Hmm.
the first one is where most people spend their time. They spend their time trying to improve their odds. You know,
Hmm.
so they'll do things like train their people better, make a better product, cut their costs, anything that
Hmm.
shifts that curve to be more positive. So I'm not going to lose 5 million in the worst case. I'm going to lose 3 million, and I won't just make 10 million. I might make 12. Okay.
Hmm.
The third thing you can do is you can actually cut off that tail risk, typically through insurance. It's quite
Nice.
interesting how businesses often wait till the end to think about insurance when maybe they should be thinking about it much earlier on. If I can
Hmm.
take that uncertainty out, then I'm done. And the last thing, and the very, very subtle thing, and we don't have time to go into it though, is about narrowing that distribution curve, basically increasing certainty, or in the opposite way of looking at it is reducing volatility. So,
Mhm.
in summary, do you want to play the game? By all means, do all the traditional things to try and improve. Can I find ways of getting rid of my tail risk at the bottom? And how can I reduce the uncertainty or increase the certainty in the result?
Absolutely. Amazing, Michael. Last question. I don't know if we have time. It's
But
more in
one
more
last
in
one, yeah.
yeah, one is perfect. What is your deeper motivation, the driving purpose behind your work, and what sustained you during the most challenging days?
Hmm. I think that that's a high level and a low level one. The low level one, the daily driver, is meeting interesting people. And I've enjoyed this conversation because you put a lot of thought into the questions, and you've got me thinking, and I like that. So I like meeting people, and that's I think a role in my job. And again, meeting people doesn't have to suit everybody, but
Absolutely.
it's a low level kind of driver for me. I mean, the high level driver for me has been really about curiosity. I'm
Mhm.
just a curious person, and I like, and the best way to learn is to go and find a problem and try and solve it. So that's been very much my high level driver. I've got a few other baser drivers, like anybody else. I like recognition, like anybody else. I like a good meal. I like a drink.
Maslow
I
pyramid.
like conversations with pretty or handsome people. I'm no different than anybody else, but I am inordinately curious about how the world works.
So I see. Thank you very much, Michael. It was such a
Good
wonderful
pleasure.
conversation,
Likewise.
and thank you very much.
Okay, Andre. You take care. Have a good day then.
Have a good
Bye
day.
bye.
Ciao, Michael.